Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Beyond the Trailer Park. And joining us, as always, from the hopefully slightly warmer Pennsylvania. Good evening, Beth.
Good evening. Yes, it is warmer. My windows are wide open.
That's good. That's good, because I was sleeping late, as I usually do, and my husband came home from work and went to put his laundry out on the wash, and I looked down like, holy shit, it's 19 degrees. Damn. Okay, this is good. And
I'm enjoying it.
That's Celsius, just so you know. Because for most of my American friends, 19 would be, holy shit, let's go put a coat and a few layers on. But no, that's tank top weather for me. But anyway, and joining us over from New York, good evening, Dr. Schloss. It's Schloss, right? That's how I say it. Excellent. Or Richard. How's everything over in New York?
Oh, pretty good. No complaints. No complaints.
Excellent. You're not being frozen any longer either, I hope.
No, actually, it warmed up nicely this past weekend, and it has continued warm today. So we're grateful for that.
It's excellent. And unfortunately, because it was such a nice day, and I don't know if people have heard yet, there was I don't know if
incident.
An incident, thank you, in Toronto this afternoon. There has not been any confirmation that it was any kind of terrorist attack. No one is saying that at all, but it does involve a large rental van that someone deliberately drove into a crowd of pedestrians in Toronto this afternoon, and they have confirmed 9 dead. And there are 5 still in critical condition in hospital, 16 injured overall. So pretty horrific. The driver has been captured alive. In fact, there is a video going around of that capture that was shot by a bystander. It's pretty amazing. It looks like the guy was pointing something at a lone police officer. One guy went at the driver and he had him at gunpoint, and it sounds like the guy is telling the cop to kill him. It sounds like he's saying, kill me. It looks though that the officer did not feel threatened by whatever the guy was pointing at him, because he was very quickly wrestled to the ground and arrested by one guy. So kudos to that officer, but the guy was taken alive. There is nothing, and I want to be very clear about this, no one has said anything about who the guy is, where he might be from, or what his motivation was. There's nothing about that whatsoever.
Unless you listen to the nut jobs here in the States.
But we don't do that. In fact, and the news I was watching before the show, they made it very clear it's being called an attack only because it is demonstrably intentional what was done, but the word terrorist has not been used. In fact, it has been expressly stated that no one is saying that at this point, but it is some sort of attack. I mean, for all we know, it could have been some, love triangle. The person saw somebody they were angry with on the street and didn't care who they took with them. We don't know.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not something that happens here. In fact, so freaky in the video where the officer is holding the driver at gunpoint. 3 people come out of a restaurant right behind, like where the van is up on the sidewalk. They come out of the restaurant and they're just nonchalantly walking down the street, like mere meters from where the cop has this guy at gunpoint. And it takes them almost 2 or 3 minutes because the officer is screaming at the guy to get on the ground. It takes them like 2 or 3 minutes to kind of,
Oh, sorry.
that's okay. Kind of go, oh shit, there's something going on, and duck into the building again. But they're just kind of like, oh, la la la, we're walking down Young Street and just oblivious. So that's how. And so with all the sirens and everything, that's so commonplace in a big city. I mean, I was saying that to my husband. We live on a very, very major street in Kitchener, and we hear sirens all the damn time. I said the only time I ever pay attention to a siren is if it sounds like it's slowing down to stop in this area. Otherwise, I'm like, oh, there's another one. You know, they just go by multiple times a day. I don't even think about it. So it's kind of scary if you know, and if it does turn out that it was some sort of terrorist thing, you know, if anybody asks me, because this is only an hour away, and I spend quite a bit of time in Toronto. I have a lot of friends in Toronto, most of which I know are okay at this point. None of them I would expect to be in that area, but you know, who knows?
You never know.
If anybody was curious, am I bothered by this? No, absolutely not. Because honestly, and this is what I've been meaning to say this, the people that, if this is connected to terrorism, which we don't know, but the people that have used vehicles to do quote terrorist acts, it's the dumbest thing you could fucking do, because who's going to be afraid of a vehicle? I'm not. I could be hit by a bus tomorrow because I didn't pay attention, right? That's just par for living in a city. So if anybody thinks that your average large city dweller is going to be terrorized by getting hit by a car, you're fucking stupid. I'm just saying.
Well, and that's the thing. I think some of those that push the whole, you know, terrorist aspect, whether it be domestic terrorist or be an international or, you know, whatever the ideology behind it, is that we can become so afraid of something that, you know, you're not going to leave your apartment or your house. And that's the way it is for me, because I don't feel safe on the street by myself. I mean, I still do go out, but I'm very careful where I go by myself. Although I don't travel much now because, well, I have extra hardware at the moment.
She broke her ankle a week or so ago.
But, you know, so I was, you know, just before coming on here earlier, I went next door to my local Sheets, and I don't believe this had happened yet, or hadn't hit the news here in the States enough that people would be aware of it, you know, for general conversation. But, you know, this is the type of area I live in. And basically the one dude, I'm going to guess between 25 and 35. I suck at guessing ages. Was basically saying, and this is an exact quote, "The next raghead I see, I'm going to shoot first and ask questions later."
Yeah, and that's just not acceptable.
Yeah, and this is what's being perpetrated, not just with the terrorism aspect, but other aspects that we're going to hit on tonight. You know, and that's crazy. I mean, we don't have a large Islamic population here. I know of two, and I don't have contact with them anymore because my job, you know, my old job, they used to come in where I got worked before almost every day. But we do have a large Hispanic population, and some of the crap I've heard people say about them, whether, from my understanding, they are all legal. I don't think there might be one or two that were illegal, but they have been sent back to wherever, whether it's Honduras, San Salvador, Puerto Rico, whatever. You know, so it's just that mindset that people are feeding into, and it's really sad because it's like I said to Deb before we went on. I mean, yeah, nobody's talking about it being terrorists except a certain few already. Like
And
the picture is like you can't tell.
the thing that people don't understand is in a situation like this, the minute you make any drastic alterations to how you live your life based on this, they've won.
They won.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly what they want. It doesn't matter, like, because I don't think where terrorism is concerned that they have a specific goal in mind other than to create chaos and fear. So the minute you become afraid, they've won.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. And I've said before, you know what? Yes, I would rather be blown up by somebody than have my country change who we are based on terrorist threats. So that's yeah. Not that this is a terrorist threat. We don't know, but I'm just saying.
Too early to tell.
Way too, like I said, it could be some lovesick asshole that's, you know, his ex-wife was on the street and didn't care who else he took out.
Well, it's just like the shooting down in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Word on the street, I've heard two different versions, and I'm a little bit more sensitive to this version because is he does have some type of mental illness and he's been untreated. Now, it's not an excuse. Okay,
No.
I've been in the throes of a psychotic break, and never once did I ever think of even hurting somebody else. Myself, whole different ballgame. But it's like there's that aspect. Then again, you know, and that brings a whole gamut of questions. But then there's, you know, I've also heard that, oh, he's a sovereign citizen. Well, I know sovereign citizens that don't go out and kill people. I still don't agree with them, but they don't go out and kill people. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what you label it. Something underneath now in the Kentucky shooting, there seems to be an obvious mental illness issue. So that kind of.
Yeah, running around in a Waffle House naked. I just.
That was Tennessee, I believe. Actually.
Oh, is it? I meant Tennessee, not Kentucky.
Nashville.
Yeah, Nashville. Oh, I don't know where I got Kentucky from.
We were just in Nashville, girl.
I know. I'm actually wearing my "Gay the Pray Away" shirt. I actually went out in public with it to a couple stores, but sadly the writing has kind of
faded.
Oh, maybe that's why the cashier was kind of short with me. Oh well. I didn't even dawn on me because it was like, but it was probably end of her shift.
I'm gonna have to go out with mine soon and see how that goes over.
Especially, I forgot I even had it on. I put it on this morning.
I'm thinking, you know, I might actually wear that to the next family function and really screw them up.
Ooh.
Not my husband's family now, but my family. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I would wear that. I wear atheist shit to my family. They know better than to say anything about it.
Well, the only reason I stopped wearing this as much as I would is that the lettering is washed right out, so I don't want to keep washing it and have the lettering disappear.
No, they were raising money for charity with those, but that wasn't a very good printing. However, those. I have not washed mine because I as you know, but Richard wouldn't know, I hate t-shirts as they are. So whenever I get like a souvenir one, I completely deconstruct it. Like this was a t-shirt once upon a time. And so I usually, the first thing I do is take the neck out and then take the sleeves off and go from there. So my Gay the Pray Away shirt is in pieces right now, and I haven't finished off what I need to do with it yet. So,
and I'm too lazy to do that shit.
I know I can't stand t-shirt neck up like so.
Yeah, sometimes they go too high. I actually think this one's backwards because this front seems awfully high, but yeah, That's the only reason I'm not wearing it as much. I've been wearing my NanoCon ones that I got too, but
try wearing a tie to work every day if you want to feel like you're being choked.
Oh, everybody! Well, I'm off work right now because I broke my ankle, so I can't be on my foot for the next 2 more weeks. But I wear it down there. I live above where I work,
but
so
he's got to wear a tie every day.
Yeah.
By the way, are you seeing me? Because I'm seeing myself on the screen, but I'm not. I don't know if you're seeing me.
Yeah, I see you. You should see whoever's talking, but if you wish to see one of us, you can click on our little thumbnail, and that'll highlight whoever you want to see.
Okay.
Do it for you. If it should do it automatically, but
sometimes it gets hung up.
When I do it, though, that's who gets broadcast. So I have to watch when I do that because I can't be like, hey, is that person picking their nose and click on them? Broadcast everybody. So I try not to do that, you know.
Good.
I don't think I've ever had a nose picking guest either, but I've been in other people's hangouts where I'm like, what is that guy doing?
My favorites are the ones that fall asleep.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I forget, was Unrenowned Tech on Holy Crap with you, Richard? Because he got caught falling asleep once on a show.
I don't remember.
He sits in a big comfy armchair when he does the show, and there's been at least once, maybe no, I think there was twice. Yeah, there was twice where he started snoring away in the armchair. We're like, I
did it once on Blog Talk. I had been up for I think 36 hours, which was unusual for me, and I had gotten the guest for a friend of mine, and so I knew her stuff, backwards and forwards, and I caught myself falling asleep, and I'm like, I gotta go. I was like, I am not snoring on air.
Blog Talk was radio only, so you didn't have to worry about anybody watching you like drool on yourself or anything, which is
good. Yeah, it took a while to get used to the camera.
So before we dive into everything, we'll just talk about you for a minute, and folks may not know who you are or anything, and so you are out of New York, as we mentioned, and you are because you end up in the tie all day. You are a psychiatrist.
That is correct. Right. I actually work in Huntington, Long Island, which is about an hour east of the center of New York City. I do have a full-time private practice in psychiatry, so I see. I'm a general psychiatrist, so I see a lot of people with depression.
I have
a lot of people with depression. A lot of people with bipolar disorder. Exceedingly common. If we see a few schizophrenics, they tend to wind up more in what we call the public sector.
Right. I guess they'd be more tend to act out and get diagnosed that way than seeking.
Right. Plus, they don't have really financial resources for private treatment, so they're on. They're on Medicaid, which means they have to go to clinics and things like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, I know. I remember when Richard was on Holy Crap with us a few weeks ago, and we got talking about the mess that is how he gets to bill for all of that fun stuff.
Don't get me started, as they say.
No. Come up here, dude. We're a lot simpler. But what of course, one of the other reasons why you're hanging out with us is you're also an atheist. So how did that work? Were you religious at one point? And if so, what flavor?
I don't think I was ever religious. I was raised by a barely observant Jewish family. It was the kind of things that, they would acknowledge the high holy days, Rosh Hashanah and all that. When I was very small, my parents kept kosher, and then they sort of gave up on that. And then they used to go through all the rigmarole for Passover, throwing out all the bread, changing all the dishes, and then they kind of got tired of doing that. So that's.
I didn't know throwing out the bread for Passover? I'm not familiar.
Yeah, you have to remove all the I forget what the term is, but anything made with leavening,
Leavened bread.
anything made with leavening, had to be discarded. Right. So
ducks in the area.
I think it was hummus was the correct term. Discarding the hummus. No, not to be confused with hummus, which is a paste made from chickpeas. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I kind of drifted along, not particularly interested in religion, but not thinking much about it. And then I met my wife-to-be, who was a somewhat observant Jew at the time. And she dragged me to services. We went to Friday night services because they were brief and they were really kind of more social. But then we started going to the High Holy Day services. And, they read the Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses. And then they start at the beginning, because that's the beginning of the year, is whenever Rosh Hashanah falls. And the first story in the Torah is the establishment of God's covenant with the Jews. And that was the story of Abraham. And when he's called upon by God to sacrifice his son Isaac as proof of his devotion.
Yep.
Everybody's just kind of reading the story and going along and singing, and I'm sitting there going, "This is horrible.
Yeah.
I can't believe that a loving God would do this. Why would anybody worship this guy?"
Yeah, it's like the most loudest story out of almost all 3 of the. That's why we call them Abrahamics, and yet it's the most horrible one out of almost all of them.
Just out of curiosity, were you already studying for your chosen career when you were?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know the first thing that came to my mind in college was schizophrenic. I know that's a terrible thing to say, but
yeah. No, I was already, I'd already finished my training at that point. And you're right. I mean, anybody who hears voices commanding him to do things is probably schizophrenic. But so at that point, I started to do some reading, and one of the first books I picked up was "God Is Not Great" by Christopher Hitchens.
Aha.
And as I was reading through that book, I was becoming an atheist, basically saying, this makes sense to me. All that, superstitious mumbo jumbo, that doesn't make sense to me. So I kind of was an atheist from that point forward.
Yeah. Excellent. That'll do it. I wonder how many people, when they really stop to think about that particular story, just go, what the fuck was I thinking?
Right. I've seen comedians handle that story and say, God is like, the sort of the borderline personality girlfriend who's like constantly asking you to prove your devotion. If you love me, you would kill that guy. And then when you're about to do it, you say, wait a minute, you took me seriously? I was just kidding.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's ridiculousness. Well, awesome that you ended up taking that path, because now you're here to talk to us, which is great.
And I am actually about to assume the reins of being president of Long Island Atheists.
Oh,
fantastic!
Right, which is a local partner of American Atheists.
I gotta ask. Have you ever run into what's her face, Caputo, the Long Island medium?
Oh,
I've never met her personally. She's got a bit of a reputation here, but she's been run afoul of the law, as you might have expected.
Oh, funny that.
and as a consumer, a one-time consumer of your type of wares, I will say it's nice to hear that there are atheists that are in psychiatry, because from personal experience, that is few and far between.
Really? I mean, and there may be a regional thing, because most of the psychiatrists I know on Long Island are atheists.
Oh, well, that's even better. I know when I was in Buffalo, I ran into that trouble, but I moved to the Midwest. I was in Kansas for a while, and it was like my one therapist, I was like, I point blank said, listen, I'm an atheist don't bring religious mumbo jumbo into session. I said, yeah, conversation, because I said it's not going to make one bit of difference. And if you'd like, we could spend the next 3.5 weeks discussing, various aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which isn't necessarily going to do you much good.
Yeah, right. Other than make me mad.
Since you brought that up, people do ask me, they say, well, don't you consider all this religious stuff delusional? If a patient starts talking about religion, don't you try to talk them out of it? And it's not really my role to do that.
No, exactly.
Right. Yeah. So the attitude I take is that if someone has faith that brings them comfort, it's not my job to strip that away.
Right.
But if they come in and they're completely racked with guilt and they feel like they're terrible person because they're constantly committing sin and they don't know what to do, and this is all because of their religion, maybe it's time to try something a little different.
Yeah,
that's my attitude.
Yeah, you got to find what works for that particular patient. But it's very, I have not been in any type of therapy for the last 9 years now. And it's nice to hear. I know, back when I was finding a therapist or a psychologist or psychiatrist that didn't have some type of religious leaning was very difficult. So I'm hopefully more and more people.
I've heard that from other people I know that have sought some sort of mental health treatment, that they often do get. Well, actually, there was a mutual friend of ours that was having some issues, and they went to a therapist, and this is a very, very vocal atheist person, and they had real difficulty because the first, and this person felt like they were in a lot of distress and they needed help immediately. And the therapist was like, well, half your problem is that you don't have Jesus in your life.
Well, and that's what I went through when before I was officially diagnosed as bipolar. They had me diagnosed as just depression. And I went to a Christian college, so I got thrown into their system. And I was being seen by psychiatrists and psychologists. They were also our professors. But the whole premise was, you're not the right kind of Christian, or you don't pray enough, your issue is spiritual, there's nothing wrong with you. One caveat I will throw in, this is before bipolar was completely, it's still not completely understood, but it was before, bipolar depression became a thing, for lack of a better word. So the understanding of it, and it wasn't, I was in school from 82 to 86, 88 really, but, and I wasn't diagnosed till 95. So you're talking a good 10 years between my onset, or full-blown onset, and my diagnosis.
And that's pretty typical, actually.
Yeah, and it is. And it's like, in one of the books Kay Jamison Redfield's Unquiet Mind was well, for me, was pardon the pun, godsend, because that book literally saved my life. Because it explained what was going on in my head, or not going on in my head. But it's nice to hear that there are people of non-faith that are in the field. I know they're out there. They're just few and far between.
Yeah. So now we all know that New Jersey is a good place to go if you're looking for a secular therapist. Because Richard's hoarding them all down in his
all of a sudden there's an influx of 20,000 people.
Oh, if only we had that many listeners. But
I could hope. I could be delusional and hope.
But so, and this is why we asked for Richard's expertise on this, because what we're going to talk about tonight is a group of folks that call themselves incels, or involuntarily celibate. And it's not all that common. I know when I first asked Richard about it, he's like, the what? Let me look that up. and I sort of heard about it peripherally off and on, but it was recently, and I don't know what the hell it was I watched on YouTube, but suddenly I was getting suggested, hey, you should watch this video about incels. I'm like, okay, what's this all about? And I watched a couple and then a few more, and it's sort of like, you know, the car accident that you kind of don't want to look at, but you do. And I just was like, wow, people need to know that this thing exists, because just wow. So let me give you, this is a definition now. This is Rational Wiki, so, you know, take it with a grain of salt, but this really is an internet / social media phenomenon. So it's not like there's a definitive clinical definition for this. So this is what we have. It says an incel is a male who is involuntarily celibate, usually blaming it on society, females, feminists, quote, bad boys, hypergamy, etc. While there are obviously many ordinary people who experience sexual rejection, incels tend to exhibit a bizarre misogynistic worldview. For example, some claim that it's cruel for females to have sex with some males while rejecting others, or to dress attractively while not being sexually available to every guy who's interested in the manosphere. There is 1,000 different types of incels, or of cells, I guess, but there's no such thing as a female incel, because shut up, that's why, according to Love, because shut up, that's why. According to a website called loveshy.com, an incel is a male who can't find a romantic partner within 6 months, which pretty much makes most single people incels. So as you can see there's even a sort of divide on what exactly makes an incel, but the groups that I've encountered largely inhabit a couple of places, one of which is Reddit. And I think, if memory serves, 4chan is another place that they like to congregate. And they're scattered, or I'm sure there's a Tumblr for them somewhere too, because everybody has Tumblr, I think. But so Richard, this was a new thing for you. What was your sort of first impressions when you took the Google dive to look into this?
Well, I guess my first impression was, you know, holy cow, these guys exist, you know. So then what I did was I looked at some of the chats that they have among themselves, and I just jotted down some notes about what was jumping out at me.
Of course, awesome.
and I wound up ordering the what I wrote down from least ominous to most ominous, I think would be the best way to put it. Right. Okay. So obviously the first thing that comes across is that these men are consumed with anger and resentment. I mean, it's seething all over the page and what's going on between them. So that's a little disturbing, but lots of people are angry for lots of reasons. So then what I noticed in some of the comments is this tremendous sense of entitlement that, you know, I deserve to have a woman. It's coming to me. I should have this. This should be coming to me. Why don't I have this? So this tremendous sense of entitlement that this is something automatic that you should have, which is obviously out of touch with the reality of human social interaction. But then what got me even a little more concerned was this kind of lack of empathy among incels. They seem to have an inability to see the other person, in this case women, as human, as anything more than an object. Right. This is something I should possess. This is something that should belong to me, and they don't get to say much about it, you know. And that kind of bleeds over into the more disturbing part, which is what I thought was frank sociopathy. Maybe we need a little definition of sociopathy there. But sociopathy is you know, being able to carry out acts that most people would consider heinous without feeling any sense of guilt. And it stems from this inability to see the other person as being equally human.
Right.
And I was seeing comments about fantasizing about making women suffer, subjugating them so that they could be forced to suffer, and that this was seen as payback, that this is what they deserve. And wouldn't it be great if we could do this? You know, and some of the descriptions were pretty graphic, actually, of what these men were fantasizing about doing. So,
Yeah.
And I found one particular quote jumped out at me, so I jotted it down. That he said that it was not progress for women to be given the right to say no. That things were better off when women didn't have the choice and had to say yes. And
Yeah.
you know, I get a chill just repeating that, actually.
That's wow. I've not even come across that much bizarre. Wow.
Right.
Like I ended up what I was watching, and I was just going by what YouTube was suggesting was a specific channel, well, two, but the first one was a fella who was ripping on incels. So he would collect a few quotes from the various places on the web and then put them up and be like, look at these assholes kind of thing. So, I mean, that was a little more palatable to watch. But then I came across, and it was a guy who identified as an incel, and it was sort of like a vlog channel where he just get on and talk to himself. And at first, it was like, okay, well, he doesn't seem so terrible. But then the more I watched, like, they were short videos. I watched like 4 or 5 of them, and I was just like, by the time I got to the last, I was like, okay, you are so negative that I cannot take another second of you. And the thing that got me, I mean, he was in his early 20s, I think, or mid 20s. He wasn't an unattractive kid. Like, I thought he was a pretty good looking kid. And the thing that just killed it was this absolute, like, bottom of the barrel, hopeless, nihilistic attitude. And I thought, you know, this is maybe a cumulative 25 minutes of listening to you, and I'm so grossed out that I can't stand it anymore. Like, how would he be in public or in person, you know? Ugh.
Well, speaking as one who falls on the nihilistic side of things, it's like I tried, and tried being the key word, to watch a few videos, and I didn't even get through 2.
Yeah.
Okay, and y'all know I watch some pretty fringe shit, okay? Even for me, who in a way is, you know, I won't say I'm involuntarily celibate, but I have chosen not to re-enter the dating scene. I have chosen to live my life by myself. I don't want the hassle, long story, but if I ever get that negative, shoot me. Please. And I've had people call me on it, you know, especially after I first got sick, because it was just like, you know, I felt worthless because there are things, and there's some things I still can't do. But
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, even for me, who I know I fall on a nihilistic scale, you know, I'm not like a complete nihilist, but I can get in. Part of that's from my bipolar, and I know that. And I tell people, just slap me upside my head and just tell me to shut up. It's like, but I know, you know, it's just, but listening to, or trying to listen to the two, I was like, no, that's scary. I mean, that is like, yeah.
One of the things that stuck out to me, as Richard mentioned, was this whole sense of entitlement. Like, I deserve to have sex with whomever I want, whenever I want. and you are taking away my rights as a human being if you don't have sex with me is just astronomical.
They haven't got past the thinking animal part. They kind of like left off the thinking.
I don't know.
Just the animal, you know, because that, I mean, that's how you would assume an animal works. They just fuck everything that moves.
Yeah.
You know, what's the saying that what makes us different from animals is we're a thinking animal. It seems they left the thinking part somewhere in their wake.
Well, I don't know that that's necessarily what, like, if you sort of listen to what they're trying to say, a lot of them, from what I get, is that they really want just a typical relationship, but because that's denied them, they've kind of gone beyond just wanting a nice relationship to this
Demand?
super entitled attitude. At least that's what I kind of see, but it just it blew my mind to read some of these people. And like Richard said, they're talking about all the horrible things they want to do to women because in their minds, and I mean, I've gone, I think I was single for 8 years for a stint. And yeah, you kind of like have times where you feel a bit lonely, where you wish you had somebody to cuddle, and sure, you get urges and you're like, oh, you know, I have to masturbate again. You know, that a lot of people go through that. In fact, I would say it's better to go through a time of being single than folks who just have to have a relationship at all times, because then you end up jumping into relationships for bad reasons. That's the way I look at it. But
do you think there's a difference there, Richard, between what Deb was describing and what these gentlemen describe on their channels and stuff, between the entitlement and going through a dry spell, so to speak?
Well, I think there's a spectrum. I think that there are some of these incels who are just, you know, angry and resentful and bitter, and you know, they're going to complain about why can't I have what I want, et cetera, et cetera. But then I think that there are others who have probably more serious character pathology who you know, are really seriously fantasizing about you know, doing harm to women or degrading them in some way, you know, as I guess in their minds it's payback.
yeah.
I guess as an outsider looking in, if I were to come across this and taking my history into consideration, I would look like, how serious should we take these people? Is this just an online phenomena?
Mm-hmm.
You know, just, you know, puffing your chest, you know, acting the big man online, or should some of us be scared in real life? I mean, is there a line we can draw, or?
That's an excellent question, and unfortunately, I don't know. I don't have the stats on that, and I don't know, you know, who does. But
if anybody does.
Yeah, I think most of it's probably just bluster, you know, and you know, fantasy. But you have to worry about, you know, is one of them going to feel emboldened to, you know, to take it beyond that?
Well, isn't that kid that did the shooting in California a couple years? Could he be?
I was getting there. So, okay. His name was Elliot Rodger.
Thank you.
And I forget how many, 6 people he killed and injured 14 others at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and then committed suicide. Now, the incel community, from what I can gather, actually revere this guy as a hero.
Oh boy.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, though, he himself never outwardly proclaimed himself to be an incel. And so there are people who, well, he never said he was an incel, so it doesn't count, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at, like, because he published manifestos all over the place bitching about how he was rich and good looking and he still couldn't get laid and this and that. And the video that he posted right before he started killing people was ranting and raving about he deserved to have sex and all of this. Judging by that, I'd say he was, if he didn't know, I don't know if he didn't know there was a term for it, or because he was wealthy and considered himself upper class, maybe he didn't want to associate with them. Who knows? But yeah, a lot of them do see him as a hero figure.
Okay, question going back to Elliot, the Rogers case. Now I forgot it. Damn it. But do these people that we would call incels, do they recognize themselves as being incels, or do they, I mean, is this their term, or is this a term that we, okay, so they actually use that term.
That's right. Their term.
That's how they identify, right?
Yeah, because if you think about it, they're not saying they use it in a way to say, because I'm involuntarily celibate, it's you females who are taking something away from me. That's what that sort of labeling says. So they're quite happy to adopt it.
Right.
Wow.
So that's one scary part, that they revere this guy.
Well, I mean, it was funny because it like, as we were as you guys were talking, and I'm going to play the dummy tonight for people, because I tried to read up and listen up on this stuff and I just couldn't do it. So I'm hopefully going to ask some smart questions, but I'm going to sit and listen and learn. But
that's fine.
The aspect with the wealth, does that play into it? I mean, as far as you guys could tell, is this a wealthy, elite thing, or do we have a wide range of socioeconomics?
I don't think they're all wealthy by any means.
Okay.
And I got the impression that they were from all socioeconomic, so. Now they have developed like their whole own culture. They've developed their own euphemisms, their own jargon. It's pretty extensive. And I'm gonna put this up on the screen. I was looking for graphics for a thumbnail and I came across this. It's called the Incel Scale. And this came from someone, it's signed Rotting Alone. So that gives you some insight.
I'm not even that nihilistic. I'm sorry.
That's someone's username, apparently, but that came up with this. So we've got level 3 in seldom, no jobs, no friends, you are trapped.
Wow.
The pure true cell. So it says a man too damaged to even leave the house and ask girls on a date, can't get rejected because he can't even ask. Pure basement dwelling, the peak of social isolation, failure of existence. And it's using a neckbeard version of Pepe the Frog.
I was just going to say, that looks like the Pepe the Frog, who, at least in the United States, is known as a symbol of the white supremacist movement.
Yes. And I've noticed a lot of strong alt-right ties to these people. But the next one is the level 2, which says they have a job, some male friends, they might live. It says is out and about in the world asking for dates both in person and online, but getting rejected endlessly. Lookism, which I believe means that they don't look handsome enough. Hypergamy, which Beth and I were talking about earlier.
What is that?
That's the one where it's another term for gold diggers.
Ah, okay.
and black pill, which black pill is in the incel community, and I've had to read the glossary for this stuff, means that they've determined that they're so ugly that they don't ever have a chance and they're just giving up. Prove that this man will never get a yes to a date request ever. Then we have the premium incel, or level 1. It says, looks max and you might be okay. So I guess that means that they're look okay. Says, can get dates, has been on dates, but for one reason or another can never get close with a kiss or sex. And can't turn the date into a series of dates and eventually a relationship. He's passable enough for girls to date, but too ugly for girls to ever commit to him in any way. And then we have the level 0, says eat shit and sign off incels.me, which is their main website, fake cell, because it's called a fake cell normie light. Says he's had sex before, has some female friends, and he just can't just hasn't had sex in decades and hangs around with incels because he can't repeat his success. But he has achieved success and for that reason doesn't deserve to be here. Okay. So
he's a phony as far as they're concerned.
Yeah. So by inference, the majority of what they consider to be true incels are virgins.
Okay, my question to both of you, since you guys have dug into this a little, and it might be off base, but this reminds me of patriarchy reversed.
Yeah.
In what? Yeah. In what way? I'm curious.
Well, the religious overtones to this is like the whole patriarchal movement, especially in Quiverful, if you're familiar with that. It seems like it's reversed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're I'm not quite sure where I'm going with, but it's just, it's like their religious upbringing has, for lack of a better word, caused this type of thinking, because we're always taught, I know when I was religious, you know, you have to be a virgin until you're married and you can't kiss, side hugs and yada, yada, yada. Okay. But instead of it being the women being taught this, the men... Okay. The men and the boys are being taught, so it's almost like a total role reversal. It's like it's not a true reflection of reality, for lack of a better word, of what's actually going on. I mean, because we are not a matriarchal society.
But they've created that illusion for themselves to try and explain their perceived failure in society.
Yeah.
One of the things I was struck by as you were going through that chart, if we can call it that, is the tremendous overemphasis on looks, and how, you know, if you're too ugly, you can't get a woman, you can't get a date. If you're just passable, you might get a date, but you won't get to have sex. And if you're good looking enough, you might be able to close the deal and have sex. As if there's a direct correlation between the better looking you are, the better chance you have. And well, there may be a little bit of truth to that. And in my experience is that it really has very little to do with who establishes relationships and who doesn't.
Well, from what I've read in the incel world, they characterize that, and I think, and honestly, I don't think many of these guys are religious. And I get a sense, although I haven't seen it said deliberately, like outwardly, but I get a sense that they tie it to evolution in a way, because they have a thing where the guys who get the babes is called an alpha, or their euphemism is a Chad. Chads get all the women. And so on this glossary I have here, it says an alpha is a male who gets all the sex he desires because his controlling and socially dominant personality is so alluring to females. Alternatively, an alpha may refer to a male to a male's tall and muscular body type that all females, without exception, are irresistibly attracted to.
Without exception, okay.
Yeah, alphas sit at the top of the sexual ladder, shitting down on loser betas and virgin omegas. Alphas are essentially marginally less asshole-ish bad boys. Their restraint, in quotes, makes sex even easier for them. Any alpha who meets all these attributes and yet fails to find sex was never really an alpha at all.
God, it almost sounds like a twisted version of social Darwinism from back in the 20s.
Yeah.
It does.
In a way.
Yeah. So then if we go
scary.
So then we go to bad boy. A bad boy is an alpha who is an asshole to females, being keyed into the revelation that they will reward him with sex in spite of, or as some would have it, because of him being an asshole. Many manosphere sites support a false dichotomy between bad boys and nice guys. Females' perceived preference for bad boys is common among self-described betas, nice guys, love shies, and incels, who see this dynamic as the cause of their own sexual failures with females. Don't be surprised if they define bad boys' behavior with heavy doses of racism and misogyny. So, and then we get to the beta. A beta is a male who is somewhat inept in relationships with females and thus doesn't get, quote, enough sex because he isn't controlling or confident enough to be an alpha, because he isn't asshole-ish enough to be a bad boy, or maybe because he doesn't buy into all this pickup artist shit at all. Note, this is not the way beta males work in animal behaviorology, where they are the second in command to alpha males and may fight to take their place. So that's how they see men. And so their whole thing is that they're a beta, so therefore no woman is going to look at them because all women prefer an alpha.
Right.
Yeah. So it takes away, to me anyway, it takes away any ownership that they may have in their own inability to achieve what they want.
Right. I think that's a very good point. I think that there's never that opportunity for introspection for someone to say, well, what am I doing wrong? What could I do differently? What is it about the way I'm coming across that may be putting women off? It's they absolve themselves of all responsibility. That it's just they were dealt a bad hand because of their physical appearance, let's say, and so they're never going to get a fair break from women, but they bear no responsibility in this.
Yeah, and the bad boy takes it a step further, because no one can ever say, well, maybe it's because you treat women poorly. He can pull it. No, see, all women like to be treated poorly. The guys who are assholes get more sex than the nice guys. So no, it's not that. It's women are shit because they like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes all responsibility away from them at all.
Right.
And no wonder it's like they just want to sit and stew in their own negativity 24/7. Just yeah. And the breadth of jargon that they've come up with is unreal. Like they've got, so I mentioned they call the alpha dudes are chads.
Right, you did say that.
Yeah, it says Chad, the man, the myth, the legend. Chad is the archetypal alpha bad boy, and he and his girlfriend Stacy are perennial objects of the manosphere's envy and resentment. Some denizens of the manosphere, particularly in Reddit's red pill community, display a high homoerotic obsession with the guy. No, really, read their fan fiction. And they even have a black version that they call Tyrone.
Uh-huh. It's interesting how they chose these names.
So,
well, that's what I was saying to Deb before we went live, and I think it was before you joined us, was that it seems as if they're making up their own terminology or making words mean what they don't mean.
Mm-hmm.
But in some ways it kind of sort of makes sense. But it's still really bizarre that they're creating it. It's almost like if you follow the evolution of religion, how religious terminology and theologies and stuff get generated. I mean, and that's kind of what it reminds me of, looking at it, from this my perspective.
Yeah, I think maybe just because we're more used to the more traditional religions, but it sounds more like the way some of the latter day religions have come about, like Scientology,
yeah,
or even Mormonism. You just kind of make it up on the fly.
Well, and the thing, I mean, how, from what you noticed, Deb, I mean, how widespread is this? I mean, I know it's mostly an online thing.
Because when you look into it, it seems to be like there's a lot of stuff out there, but I've never come across anybody that well, then again, how many of them come out of the basement based on this? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and that's the thing. I mean, for all I know, I mean, well, most of the people I talk to are within the atheist community in some way, shape, or form, but it's like, would you're talking to one?
I think you would before too long, because I don't think any of these people can keep that pretense of I don't want to say normalcy, but they have such a disdain for women and normal society that I don't know that they'd be able to pretend that they were happy to be out in public for that long. I don't know.
I mean, I guess what it is like in some of the debate groups that you and I are in, I have noticed that most of my comments are ignored.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the thoughts that runs through my head sometimes, because, I try to make my comments very pointed and very on point and like, duh. But they just get totally ignored. And then like, it'll just go around the point. I mean, and I'm wondering, how many of these people, I mean, is it because of their disdain, have this thinking in the back of their head, like,
In some cases, I think it might be. Now, for me, I sometimes think that way because I debate a lot of Muslims, and I know that there are times where I make a comment and I'm ignored because I'm a woman.
Yeah. I mean, there's some that are definitely religiously based, but I'm wondering, not just, I'm using the debate groups as an example, but like, I know some within our circle do get into these discussions to try to further the cause, or to, dither in the other side, and can this morph over into a religious ideology, or morph into a religious ideology to the point that it's not even, you can't even separate it? Is it something we'll recognize? I mean, well, the guy you were talking to the other day.
Yeah, which one?
the one you did the debate with, where like
Mr. White Wolf. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he claims atheism.
I would have actually thought he could have been an incel, except that he claimed to be married.
Yeah, but it's just it's like you think about stuff like, and not just with the incels, but with anybody that has a unusual ideology behind how they think. I mean, how would you even know?
You wouldn't, because I mean, you listen to my and Richard. Couple of weeks ago, I debated a fellow. First in Facebook, and then I actually went on his YouTube channel, who was a very proud racist, homophobe, transphobe, and sexist. Like, blatantly happy about the whole thing.
He wasn't president of the United States, was he?
No, he's too young for that.
Thank God.
He was born the year I got my driver's license, so thankfully, no.
Okay.
But he could be, you know, he of course loves your president. You can imagine.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and I debated the guy for a couple of hours, if you can call it that. He's one of those guys. You'll appreciate this, Richard, because he did the whole, you know, trans people are mentally ill. So I had done hours of research beforehand. I got all of the APA stuff out, you know, I got the official statement. And the minute I said, this is from the APA, oh, liberal garbage. So your entire professional association is liberal garbage. I just thought you might want to know that.
I suspected as much, but okay.
I know. But you know what was really funny? Because he put a lot of stock in IQ tests for putting down Black people. I'm like, you know, I read up on that, and the APA doesn't really put that much stock in them anymore, because they can be, you know, the question.
There's a lot of factors aside from native intelligence,
exactly.
such as your socioeconomic, you know, background that you grew up in, that kind of thing.
There's a lot of things that can affect it. And like in Canada, it's not even that common. Like, I've never even seen an IQ test. I wouldn't have, my mother's never seen an IQ test. Like, with no idea. Because he would say, well, it's a predictor of you know, where they're going to go and how people can learn and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, my mother was an educator for 33 years. She never seen an IQ test, so fuck off. But it was okay to accept something that came from the APA when it did what he wanted it.
Of course.
But the minute I said, you know, but you know, the APA doesn't really use IQ tests. Oh, liberal bastards. I'm like, people who wrote the fucking things.
Well, that brings up another question, I guess, query, is, do these men that consider themselves incels, do they have any type of literature besides propaganda that even supports their idea, or is it all just
anecdotal? From what I can tell, every last bit of it is just them talking to themselves and reinforcing the same ideas between each other.
Right. But you know, when you were asking earlier about, you know, with religious aspect, I don't know that this is religious, but I mean, I was struck that there was kind of a cult-like aspect to their roots.
I got reamed the other day about using the term cult because I use it too widely, and I'm like, okay. That's why I didn't say cult, because
we have to be of the opinion that a lot of, if not most of, religions could be considered a cult. So, you know.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not gonna.
Well, the difference between a cult and a religion is, you know, more money and better PR. You know.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, that's my flippant response, but I do know that. I mean, but yeah, it's just.
No,
there was a question, and I can't remember what it was.
I do see a lot of cultic aspects to the
whole. It reminds me a little bit of NXIVM.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I'm watching that develop, and I've been following it, well, not since the beginning, but since it hit the news with Keith Raniere, and it's like, oh my God, it's like Scientology and everything all mishmashed together.
If you think about it, because what is what does Scientology do? What does Mormons do? What does Nexium do? They create their own lingo.
Yeah, and that's exactly what these guys appear to be doing.
I've got a whole fucking glossary. I mean, we've got something. So we talked about the alpha and the beta male. Well, now I've just discovered that there's something called a gamma.
Ah.
Oh, Jesus.
We're going further
like
through
I'm
the
in
Greek alphabet.
statistics again.
I know.
Yeah.
Gammas are either a guy who, quote, does not play the game, or a guy who is very introspective and weird, depending on who you ask. So they're even deriding any kind of introspection. It's like, oh, you're introspective, you're a gamma. Like,
does this seem to be based solely on interpersonal relationships?
Yeah.
Because I guess, like, we were talking about it a bit before the show, and one caveat I want to make: I'm not deriding men who have had issues dealing with custody. I mean, I have a friend who has multiple children to multiple women, and basically his entire paycheck is for child support. And there's a problem with that when you're left with no money and have to get a second full-time job. Yeah, that's not what we're talking about. You know, I mean, yes, there are issues with custody and stuff that are legitimate gripes, and I've personally seen it. I mean, granted, it's an anecdote, but I do know men that have issue with how custody issues are handled. But these guys seem to be all basing it. It doesn't seem to be anything solid like that, but it's all interpersonal communication where they have failed in some way, shape, or form. But like you said before, they won't take responsibility for it.
No, they get together and create this huge echo chamber where they all pat each other on the back. Woe is you. You know, oh, that bitch said no. Well, I had a bitch say no to me too.
Okay. Something you just said kind of made this question pop into my head, and I pardon the crudeness, but it sounds like they're stroking each other's dicks. Are these guys gay?
You know, I have to wonder.
I know it's a terrible way of putting it, and I'm sorry, but that's what popped into my head. It sounds like these are men who are not comfortable with their own sexuality in some way, shape, or form. And I'm just wondering if it's...
That could
am I like so far out in left field that I've read way too much conspiracy shit in the last week? I don't know.
Didn't you say earlier that there was some, or at least from their own literature, that there was kind of or someone who was writing about this was saying that there was a homoerotic fascination with the alpha male?
With the Chad, yes.
With the Chad, right.
Okay.
Chad. Apparently there's fan fiction out there, so it could well play into it. I've not.
I might not be that far off base. Holy shit!
I don't know if they're all gay, but I think it's possible that there are some, closeted gays probably hiding among the ranks of the incels.
Yes, I wouldn't be surprised either.
And being one who is part of that community, I find that very distressing and disconcerting, for the fact that somebody feels or maybe not feels they have to hide it, but are so uncomfortable with who they are that they would go to this extreme.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, to me, that's like a, what's the word? I don't know if psychopathy is the right word, but that it's like a trigger waiting for a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really disconcerting, because I mean, I never had issues as far as coming out. Yes, I've faced some discrimination here and there, but nothing where, it's like, Surge, when we were on, when Atheists on Air was still around with Cash. I mean, yeah, I mean, part of the reason I decided, the hell with the pseudonym and all that other crap was because here was a black gay 23-year-old man living in Texas who was scared to leave his own house. And, I couldn't deal with that anymore. I've heard so many, and it's almost kind of hearing that story again.
Yeah.
But, it reminds me of the dynamic of, you hear from time to time about these these ultra right wing politicians, at least in this country,
Yeah.
who campaign against rights for gays and lesbians, and we're against giving them equal rights for marriage, and always invoking the Bible to rail against the sin of homosexuality, and then they turn out to be gay, and they're caught in a roadhouse bathroom with some younger man or something like that.
Yeah.
How many times I've read that, and actually even in my own life when I was in university, there was a guy that I was never really that friendly with him, but he was like good friends, so he was sort of peripherally in my sphere of friendship, but he was always very homophobic but yet very flamboyant. And many years later, because one of our roommates ended up being gay, was the first gay person that I knew. And we became friends and roommates later on. And when he finally moved to Toronto, I would go and visit him. And lo and behold, in this gay bar in Toronto, I run into Mr. Homophobic. And I'm like, oh, hi. And he was just mortified. Yeah. Like didn't even acknowledge my existence, like just ghosted out of there. And I'm like, yep, that makes more sense now. But there's actually been at least one study that indicates that the more homophobic someone is, the more likely it is that they are closeted and struggling with accepting themselves.
Right. It was George Carlin who said so many smart things, but who said that the gay bashers, the ones who go out looking to beat up gays and things like that, and then very often have homophobic they're homophobic because they have fears about their own proclivities. And the way he put it was that the gay bashers are not trying to kill the gay without, they're trying to kill the gay within.
And that's what I was taught implicitly, because I never actually, even to this day, I've never actually officially come out to my family. If they haven't figured it out after 50 years, that's on them, not me. But taking away the homophobia aspect of it, how do you deal with people like this? I mean, how would you approach it? Throwing a bit of pop psychology or real psychology. I mean, how do you deal with people like this? I mean, how would you approach talking to them?
I don't know if they. Yes.
Is it even possible?
Yeah, I mean they're pretty heavily defended, so it's kind of hard to break through. First of all, they have to come in looking for help. You can't just accost them and say, "Listen, you need to start thinking this way."
But I mean, like, even their online communities are very insulated. Like, there's a forum website that I found, incels.me, which of course you have to be a member of to see anything. You can't just, because some forums you can read stuff, but you can't post, right? This one, now I could be wrong because I only spent a few minutes there, but it didn't look like you could see anything without, and some of the topics that were listed on the front page, I'm like, I don't want to see that anyway. But their former main home was Reddit. And I know that their original subreddit was shut down by Reddit for being too misogynistic, probably because they were talking about all the horrible, nasty things they want to do to women who won't sleep with them. Yeah. Now, I went back to Reddit and looked for incels, and there is an incel community listed there, but it's private now, and you have to be approved by a moderator to get in there. So I'd have no hope in hell in getting in there unless I pretended to be a dude, and it's not worth my trouble because I don't want to necessarily read that, because watching it was kind of soul crushing. But they do seem to be very insulated, except now the ones that go on YouTube, of course, you know, you can see that. I don't know that you might want to, but you can. But they do seem to just not want to get involved with people much. And part of me feels bad that they feel so
That insulated, yeah.
That they feel so rejected all the time. But on the other hand, you know, I've been through times in my life when I was younger. I mean, shit, I remember being in high school thinking like, I'm 16 and I've never, you know, back then we used to call it going with a boy. You know, so-and-so's going with that boy. Like, it wasn't even dating because we were too young to date. But I remember hitting 16, 15, 16 and thinking, what's wrong with me that I've never had a date and that I've never gone with a boy and any of that. All that meant was, you know, you talk to him on the phone and you might get to go to his house if his parents are home. But that was, you know, what we thought of as going with a boy.
See, and all I cared about was hockey. I didn't give a shit about any of that. I say it jokingly, but I really didn't even know. I mean, I knew the term, what it meant to be a lesbian. You know, I knew the term home, but I didn't give a shit. It wasn't until I was in college when it, you know, it was like, you know, when I you know, quit playing hockey when I was. Then I, you know, the real world started to creep in, but it's like, I didn't give a crap about it. But I know people, you know, well, like you, you know, their whole self-worth was on who they were going with.
And even then, like, and I'll be the first to admit, you know, after I had a boyfriend finally through the last couple of years of high school, and we broke up before we went away to university. And you know, there was a couple of people I dated in between. I had a lot of fun with some other guys in between, but you know, at one point, you know, I'm reaching when I was 28 and I'm like, okay, I'm not married and I don't have a steady boyfriend. Like, what's wrong with me? And I married my stupid ex way too fast because I had that urgency of like, shit, I'm 28 and I'm single. That's not good. And I wasn't even thinking about kids. Like, I don't want kids. I never wanted kids. But it was still that, but you're 28 and you're single. That's not normal kind of thing. So I kind of get that. But on the other hand, you know, even if it was a bad decision, I did something about it.
But where does that notion come from that we have to have a partner, whether you're gay or straight? It doesn't really matter.
You're right, because that was, I think, the smartest thing that I ever learned was that I don't have to have a partner. When I mean,
it sounds like these incels are. It sounds like they're stunted on that notion that they have to have a significant other of some way, shape, or form.
Self-worth.
Their whole entire self-worth is plastered.
Their ability to attach themselves to someone else.
Right. But again, where they've kind of gone wrong, you know, if you want to use that word, is that they seem to have difficulty seeing the woman, the potential partner, as a full thinking, feeling human being like themselves.
Yes.
That she's an object to be acquired.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they're mad because someone, be it the woman or society or whoever, has told them they can't have that thing for their collection.
Right. Right. You know, I was while you were speaking about your past, I was remembering, like, in college, you know, instances where there was an attractive girl, and I would ask her out and she would say no. And so I might grumble about it to, you know, to a buddy. And very often I'd be told things like, well, you know, girls like that, they really only like bad boys. You're a nice guy, so she's not going to like you. She only likes the bad boys. You know?
Yeah.
And that plays right into what they're saying. In fact, I've learned that there's a different group Now, I don't know if they would be considered incels as well, but there's a whole other group called nice guys.
Uh-huh.
And so I've seen a couple of videos where it's a woman who says, you know, oh, this guy talked to me and he was very pleasant and, you know, offered to carry my bags for me or something. And then as soon as I said I didn't want to go out with him, he turned into a total asshole and started, you know, sending abusive texts and things like that. And that's what is termed the nice guy. So they start off very nice and amiable and all of that with the hopes of, I don't know, getting a date or getting laid or what, I don't know. And the minute they don't get what they want, they turn into some guy like this.
Right. Doesn't sound all that nice, does it?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a whole other group apparently. Like, hey. And I mean, like for instance, I found another. We've got, what was it? Alpha, beta, gamma. Now I found omega.
Oh, we stepped all the others in between.
Yeah, no deltas. No. Okay. We've got omega. Is a male who has no prospects whatsoever of getting laid. Omegas are below alphas, betas, and every other rung on the imaginary sexual hierarchy. Omega is occasionally used as a term of pride by pickup artists to glorify their technique. According to these males, they are not alphas because they are not heavily muscled jocks, but they can nevertheless get sex from females through their game technique, so the pickup game. That is to say, their game supposedly transcends their alleged physical unattractiveness. Of course, a more likely explanation of this phenomenon is that, contrary to manosphere beliefs, different females are attracted to different types of males.
Imagine.
I know. And it's funny, the racist guy that I debated, he started in with this whole, oh, women only like alpha males and they want strong men. And I'm like, oh, you mean assholes? He's like, well, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, funny, my husband's nothing like that.
No, he's not.
The racist guy would have totally labeled my husband a beta because he's very quiet and reserved and he's a little on the shy side sometimes, but he's also muscular as fuck, and he is a second-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu and Japanese weapons, and would turn the guy into a pretzel before he even could blink twice. So, you know.
Well, that's what I find so funny about individuals that follow, you know, like your husband. It's like, you know, you guys are labeling him this, that, and the other thing, and he'd wipe you off the face of this earth if he wanted to.
He's so much more complex than that. I mean,
yeah, and they're trying to oversimplify something that they either don't understand or have no concept of.
And I mean, people would think of him sometimes as a bit socially awkward. He's just very quiet. And sometimes when we meet people, I'll get, I don't think your husband likes me. I'm like, why would you say that? He didn't say anything. Oh, don't worry. He never talks to anybody.
Well, it's like the Susan Westenhofer skit that I still, well, that sucks donkey dick from. Her at the time of this album, for lack of a better word, she did put this out as an album years ago. She had a girlfriend who was a phys ed teacher and who was not super out because she worked, you know, at this time, this is probably late 90s, worked for the school. And I believe they were with Susan's family, who was very fundamentalist. And her girlfriend was very super, super quiet. And the mother made a statement. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I mean, completely out of character, the girlfriend goes, well, that sucks, donkey dick. And everybody did. And that's kind of what Arnold reminds me of. But and that's where I get that line from, because that skit is just so, for people I know, so fucking perfect. And it kind of fits me, because sometimes I can be super, super duper quiet. I'm a wallflower, even more so now than I was before, but that's the way I like it, you know. And then I'll come out with something and it'll be like, well, you know, so that, but it's people like that out of nowhere, as I said, will turn you, as you said, will turn you into a pretzel.
Well, and as I say too, he doesn't say much, but when he talks, it's either one of two things: a horrible dad joke, pun, or something really profound.
Yeah, then you're sitting there scratching your head trying to figure out what the hell he just said. He did that, I think on our way home from Tennessee. I sat there for like 10 minutes trying to, not that I didn't understand what he said, but I just was like, what does he mean? And not because it was something stupid or, you know, off the, I was just like,
wow. I never
yeah,
thought.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and Richard wouldn't know, but he's a Zen Buddhist, so
yeah,
that's the other reason why he's really quiet. He's a Zen Buddhist. He sits and thinks a lot, you know. But people get sort of put off by that if they don't understand that. Like, for instance, I'm very, very outgoing, and I tend to talk a lot. I don't know why you would ever think that, but and I'm
never have guessed.
Never. Yeah. When we go out to conferences and things, I'm always talking to people. I'm always interested to meet new people. I mean, shit, when I'm traveling, I'll end up yapping to the person next to me in line at the airport, that kind of thing. And it's so different and so quiet, but it's, and I lost my train of thought. Damn it. Because I got thinking about, I'm traveling soon, but sorry, I love flying, and I'm like, yay, I get to fly in like 2.5 weeks. So, but it's just, they expect that from me, and then he comes along and he's like super quiet, and I'm like, yeah, don't worry. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. So, he was always quiet around people I knew. And the first year we were together, his company that he works for used to, they've gotten cheap. They don't do this anymore, but they used to take us for a nice big Christmas party every year. And it would be a big venue that was, there were multiple companies, small companies, that would have a night at this big banquet hall, and we would have like 3 or 4 tables worth of people, and it was lovely. And so I'm thinking, the first year we got invited, I thought, okay, he's worked at this place now like 25 years. At the time, he had worked there like 20 years or 18, whatever. And I thought, okay, these are people that he works with, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day for years and years. Finally, I'll get to see him talk a bit. No, I did all the talking. He just kind of smiled and, yeah, these are my friends at work.
Well, and that brings up another, if these guys are, excuse me, so insular, that it's an online thing, it makes me wonder, because like, I am not a social butterfly. I prefer to be alone. Many reasons, but I hate people. That's what it comes down to. I'm sorry, there's no easy way to say it.
Yeah.
But I've had people like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. And it's like, I try. I am agoraphobic. I don't like to leave my apartment. I have my safe zones. So, but I look at these guys that are so insular to the point, can they even function in, quote, normal society? I can go to the store. I can hold my job. Granted, my job is downstairs, but before I moved, it was down the street. So I can go, I can function in the real world. Can these guys even function in the real world?
Well, based on that chart thing that we were looking at, if you look at the one Pure True Cell, it says no job, no friends, you are trash. And implied that most of them live in their parents' basements and things like that. So I don't know if that, I'm guessing by the signature on it that it was created by an incel person, but I don't know that. So that could be incorrect, but that's sort of the impression that.
I mean, wouldn't it be normal human reaction to, okay, if you're that bad, no job, you know, you think shit of you, wouldn't you want to improve yourself?
You'd think, but remember, they've taken away all of their responsibility towards doing anything. They believe that they're owed this. And
okay.
So they're basically waiting for someone to present them with what they believe they're owed.
Wow, that's really fucked up.
That's how I read it anyway. It's like Richard said, that whole sense of entitlement. Yeah. So if it's, and I think that's where some of the alt-right stuff comes from that I've seen, is that whole, well, if I, you know, women are shit, that's why I don't have a relationship and can't have sex. And then if I don't have a job, then it's going to be, you know, immigrants' fault or something like that. So it just kind of carries on with that. It's everybody else's fault mentality right into alt-right stuff.
Mm.
That's my interpretation anyway.
But you'd think after, just throw a number out, 7 years, you would think that type of thinking would just collapse in on itself. Like, well, maybe it's not their fault. Maybe it is mine, but
no.
Maybe I'm giving them too much credit.
You need the capacity for insight to be able to do that.
Okay.
Because if you look down on somebody who sits and thinks about, what am I doing wrong, then they're not going to ever sit and do that. Or, you know, what is it that makes me do it? Doesn't even have to be what am I doing wrong, because I do a lot of introspection, but I do it in a way of, why am I feeling this way? Or why am I thinking this way? Or why did I want to do X? Things like that. It's not even, you don't even have to do it from a negative sort of standpoint of doing anything wrong. It's just, why am I like that? Why do I feel like that? And
so there's really, I mean, in a sense, there's really no way of reaching somebody like this.
Possibly. I don't know. It doesn't look very
promising.
No.
Because I'm just thinking, I know when I was at my worst, when I was first diagnosed with bipolar, it took a while, and it took, you know, quite a few meds, yada, 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 and, you know, 3 years of therapy. And, you know, I jokingly say when I dumped religion, everything was all peachy keen, which actually it was, but I had to look at things in my past to realize, I mean, it just, you would think they would want things to be better.
Well, but they do, but they want it to be made
handed.
Better.
They want to hand it to them. That's it.
Right. Yeah, it's like, and that's like, wow. It's like, even after my recovery from the stroke, I mean, yeah, I could have people do things for me, but eventually, like, one of the guys, you know, downstairs that I work with is, you know, very helpful as far as, because there's some things I still can't lift, and I'm like, no, let me try it. You know, because I have to find out for myself what I can and can no longer do. And I said, if I can't do it, then you can help me. And he's like, oh, okay, you know, and so now they let me try, and if I can't do it, then they'll come and help me. But it's like, you would think that people would want to see, you know, would want to kind of expand. But it's like, yeah, if I ever get like that, shoot me. I mean, that has got to be a really,
it is, and some of it's really contradictory too. I was just scrolling through this glossary here. And I remembered some of the things that I'd seen on videos too. They gripe about women who won't just, give them sex. And yet they look down on women who they say are, quote, slutty.
Mm-hmm.
So to them, a perfect girl, they call it a unicorn because they believe it doesn't exist, is a perfect, loving, faithful girlfriend or wife, usually attractive and non-slutty. Obviously, such women do not exist. And so they call her a unicorn, but not slutty. So, but yet they expect every woman they come across just to want to have sex with them. That doesn't compute.
What would they do? Okay, being that if I wasn't gay, with somebody who's asexual.
Oh,
for me, a relationship is not just sex. In fact, I could give two shits about sex.
But if you don't give them what they so richly deserve, then you're just depriving them, aren't you?
So the issue seems to be here that if the woman gives them what they want, that validates them. But if she's giving it to everybody, then they're not validated because right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they have to be like pretty, but not slutty. So we're back to the whole Madonna horror complex.
Oh, there we go.
Mm-hmm. Because that doesn't get kicked around enough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So we got about 10 minutes or so left here. So Richard, do you have any other sort of ideas that have come to mind or
Well, I was just thinking again a moment ago while you were speaking about, you said there's a link with the alt-right crowd, when the alt-right crowd here unfortunately have links to white supremacist groups. Yeah. It seems to me that they're sort of flip sides of the same or similar kind of dilemma, if you will, is that the white supremacists feel like they feel like their rights are being taken away because they've always been privileged. And now when someone takes away your privilege, you feel like you're being oppressed. Whereas the incels have never had the privilege, but they feel like they should have had it. So it's like one group said, you took away my privilege. The other one said, you never gave me my privilege. It's almost the same issue, but it's like the mirror image of it. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yep. That's pretty. I'm just noticing because we usually get people chatting on the YouTube live chat, but we also simultaneously broadcast audio through Spreaker, and I just noticed that there was somebody commenting the whole time, and we haven't had Spreaker comments in ages. So I'm sorry, Josh. I did not notice that until just now.
Oh, I can pull that up again.
Yeah, I'm just taking a skim to see if there's anything that we really should address before we go. Yeah, he seems to be agreeing with us on most things. I like comment when we were talking about the homophobes that are probably gay. He says, I've seen more gay relationships last longer than straight ones, so it clearly is a sign that a lot of homophobes need to wake up. I like that idea for sure. Well, and I know it's completely off topic, but I've often said to homophobes, like, gay people have to fight for their relationships and their marriages. So I think they, on a very, very broad scale, tend to value them a little more. Because I think because they have to fight so hard for them. I could be totally wrong, but that's
well, I think there's some truth to that, because I know, even though I've had, well, okay, my last one doesn't count because she ended up in prison and I dumped her faster than I could. But we try to make things work no matter what. And we usually stay in a relationship too long that we should have ended months or years before. But it's like when I still lived in Buffalo, I had numerous friends that were 30, 40-year relationships.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I knew when I was working in the antique business years ago, I mean, I as a straight chick in the antique business, I was way in the minority. And there were guys that had been together for 20, 30 years at that point. And there was two guys that they were other antique dealers. And I mean, I've been away from that for well over 20 years, so I don't know where they are now, but they were Tim and Jim, and they were the most adorable couple, and they actually looked like each other to the point where if we weren't at an antique show and they were wearing their name tag, I would get them mixed up. I mean, they were the sweetest guys, and they've been together forever. I don't know if they always looked like each other or if they started to look like each other after living together for years. I don't know.
That's always been a joke within the community. You start dressing and looking like each other. It's like my one girl I dated, I was like, oh no, I hope I haven't. She had to match her socks to her underwear. I'm like, nope. I'm a plaid with polka dot type person.
So if I could get in a little statement here. Okay. So I had the privilege, if you will, this past weekend of seeing Cecile Richards. I don't know if that name rings a bell, yes. But she is has been the president of Planned Parenthood for the last 8 years.
Oh, I did see something on your Facebook page that you were going to that.
Right. So she's on a book tour now. She has written a book, and she at our local bookstore in Long Island, which is the largest independently owned bookstore on Long Island. She was there to do a talk, which she did, and a book signing. You know, it was I was encouraged and discouraged at the same time because there was a huge turnout. But myself and the guy that I went with and 2 teenage kids in the back were the only 4 males in an audience of about maybe 80 people.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, you know, she was saying, "Where are all the men?" And you know, on the way out, one woman was saying, you know, my husband asked if he should come, and I told him, "Nah, stay home." And I'm like, why would you do that? He was willing to come.
Yeah, I mean, we need to encourage more male participation and stuff like that.
So where I was going with this was, I think that it ties into, you know, if we can combat incels, although not that they're going to listen, but with the radical idea that women are human beings.
Yes.
And they're not some you know, small model of men who don't have the same desires and you know, capabilities. They're the other half of the human race, and you have to treat them the way you would want to be treated. And I think that incels have fundamentally lost that concept. I don't know how to give it back to them, but that's the fundamental problem.
See, now that statement, I don't know how to give it back to them, really scares me. It's like, okay.
Well, and you have to wonder how much of that is to do with, you know, how they began to develop in society. Like, how far back does that disconnect go? Who knows? And it's going to be different for every person too, how far back that goes, which it makes it a whole other level of challenge, because and I mean, there never is one fix for every person. There never is. But it makes it a lot tougher when you don't even have a clue where to start. But I mean, I'm going to say, like I said, that kid that I was watching on YouTube for a while, I'm like, I thought he was a good looking kid.
Mm-hmm.
I did. But he was just so negative about everything. Like, he never smiled about anything. He never, like, his tone was always in the dumps and just everything. And I'm like, I don't know how you could stand yourself that way.
Well, what concerns me when you have somebody that maybe is 25-ish and already having a outlook.
It's
like
bleak.
what the fuck happened to him when he was a teenager?
Well, that's a good question. Is we don't know their backgrounds. These guys.
And it scares me to think that maybe something did happen that was never addressed because he had parents that thought it was my parents didn't believe in mental illness, so everything I did or said was it was a spiritual problem. My college reinforced that idea. And so it makes me wonder, did something happen that caused that to that notion to ferment in his mind, or did something not happen, or or is that something his father taught him? It's like, it's really scary.
Even though I couldn't stand to watch him anymore, I did really feel bad for the kid. Because I mean, he was just so negative about everything to do with his and he'd even gone on some dates. Like he was, oh, I went on this date and here's why it was terrible. And here's why, she'll never go out with me again, or, just completely destroying any positive that he could have had. And I just thought, like, dude, and I even thought to myself, have you not even thought about getting assessed whether medication might help? Because
that's the thing. You're describing someone who sounds like a chronic depressive, and probably would benefit from treatment. Yeah,
exactly. Like, go see a doctor, and maybe that's part of the whole stigma behind the mental health.
Could be.
Which I hate that it's like that. People are afraid to go and get treated. I know this is a whole other topic, but people who get afraid to go and get assessed, that go get treatment, and who think that if I ever have to take medication because of depression or something, that I'm defective, or just the way we look at it is so horrible. And
I could do 2 hours just on that. So
well, I think you're kind of hitting a good point, is that, I mean, the 8 years I spent in therapy and on medication and yada 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 really sucked, but I enjoyed getting some semblance of sanity back. Some people think I'm still insane, but and I joke about it, and it's one of the things I try to do when I talk to people is, being mentally ill is not that, I won't say not that big of a deal, but if you learn the proper coping mechanisms, etc., you're going to be able to lead a normal life. It's almost like these people enjoy wallowing in this pain. It's like they don't see anything better from themselves, and the fact that they're being reinforced by other people doing the same thing. It's just it's I mean, like you said, go see a doctor.
These websites are just like giant circle jerks for them.
Right.
Big giant pity party, and that's not going to help anybody.
Reinforcing the negative attitude, unfortunately.
Yeah. And like you said, when I was listening to that kid, I really did think, maybe you should get some medication. That might help. But they don't seem too keen to do that. So, well, thank you, Richard, for joining us. It was very helpful. And in case anybody was wondering why I didn't ask an incel to come and talk about it, well, I don't really like being told how we're shitty for being women and whatnot. So I didn't think that was a very good way to go. They don't seem to be very approachable as it is. So,
I don't think so.
And I don't mean to be like, well, we're just going to sit and talk about them and put that. I really do feel bad for these guys to a lot of extent. I mean, some of them are very hateful to everybody, and to some degree, are responsible for their own issues because they refuse to take responsibility for their own issues. But I absolutely have some empathy for the guys, and I wish that they didn't feel that way. I really, but yeah. I really, if I even could have got somebody to come on, I don't think it would have been the best decision. So, and you know, Richard is enlightening, and he I think you may have learned a couple of things too. So, you know,
I think so. Yes.
excellent. Hey, it's like I taught something to a psychiatrist. That's okay. I don't have to. I don't have to jump on that. It's all right.
Well, I think what's important is, like, you know, from my perspective, is that having Richard on kind of brought some things into focus and a different way of looking at it. I mean, I could look at it from a completely, you know, outsider point of view and gain no understanding and think all these crazy ass shit things about these gentlemen. And like you said, in some ways, that they have that type of thinking is sad. It's disgusting, but it's sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that we're aware that there are loosely based communities out there like that.
Yeah. Well, especially if they morph into alt-right or into the white supremacist movement, then we have a bigger issue.
Yep. And I mean, we've already had one of these guys kill a bunch of people. You know, it's good to be aware of the sort of talking points that are out there. Maybe somebody will be able to pinpoint somebody who looks like they're treading dangerously. You never know. But awareness is always knowledge is power, as they say. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So, Richard, is there anything that you want to plug before we go? Your groups or anything, or do you have website or something you want to talk about?
That's a good question. You know, well, Long Island Atheists is our local group, as I said. We're supposed to have a web presence. It hasn't happened yet, so we're working on that.
Get on that, President. Come on.
Well, as soon as I take over, that's going to be priority number one.
There you go.
Right. But you know, we're quite an active group. We have forums and monthly discussion groups and general membership meeting, and we have hikes, and we have drinking with atheists, and which is always popular.
Yep.
So awesome. I invite anyone from our population area, which comprises 3 million people, to you know, if they feel like they don't fit into any of the organized religions, to check us out.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Most atheist groups, where, you know, if somebody who's not an atheist wants to come out and find out about you, nothing wrong with that.
We've had Christians come to our meetings just because they were curious, and they usually come in with all sorts of misconceptions, and they leave saying, I learned a lot. I had no idea, you know.
Yeah, we've had people crash our local meetups before. But you know, we're always, if somebody has a question, we're always happy to answer it. So there you go. Well, awesome. And again, thank you for joining us. It was a lot of fun.
Pleasure.
Learned a few things too, and always good to have a professional angle on stuff like this. So awesome. Beth, where do we find you?
Easiest way is on Twitter, Dune9998, which connects to my blog, Havoc and Chaos. And I got a couple articles I'm working on, a couple of the debates I've been in, analyzing them not just for the debate aspect, but for myself as well, as I'm trying to tweak a few arguments. And that connects to Facebook, which is under Beth A. Hambridge. If you send me a friend request, please say that it's related to the show, or I may not approve you. And I'm on YouTube, but I haven't put anything out lately, so I thought maybe while I was off I'd get something out, but
oh well, all in good time. All in good time.
Yeah, I've been enjoying sleeping. I'm finding that having too much time on my hand. Oh, and one last thing, I do have my You Caring. I'll post the link in on my page and on Twitter, and also on the group page. You know, being off work, trying to pay rent is a little difficult. So if y'all could, I got at least 2 more weeks of being off work, so I just got to survive those 2 weeks, and I'm planning on going back to work next month, whether I have the cast on or not. So
okay, that's good. So yeah, any little bit will help with that for sure.
Yes,
and if you can't give, at least maybe give it a share. That would be
if you guys could share it, I'd love you for it. You know, as I said, actually, even $2 helps because I do have a cat and trying to keep cat food and litter. You know, for me, you know, my biggest concern is rent. So my food's fine.
And her cat is a moose that's trying to pretend to be a cat.
Yeah, he will be a cat in 15 days.
Yep, he'll be a year old.
Yes, he will be a year old on the 8th or the 12th. I can't remember.
Pretty scary that he's that huge already.
Yeah, and I tried picking him up. He was in a very odd spot, and bending over is difficult for me. And trying to pick him up and bend over is like, you gotta help me here, dude. You weigh fucking 15 pounds now, so he's like a moose.
Oh boy.
But he knows it. He knows it, and he'll squinch down to the ground so I can't get him.
That's what my youngest cat does. She's not that heavy, but she's put on some weight in the last few years since she got spayed, and her nickname is Sausage. And what she'll do if she doesn't feel like getting picked up, if you lean down towards her, she'll flop over on her side. So
he thinks he owns the hallway in the apartment where I live there, and there's 2 other cats, and we have like an upper door, like a fire door. And during the winter, we keep that closed, so he doesn't usually go down the stairs. But it's that time of year where we're gonna have that door open, and I'm like, he was pretty good about it last year, but I don't know what he's gonna do this year. So. He gets out the door, and he, especially if Dave and Marlene are here, he'll go down to their apartments. And you know, I own this hallway, and
I wouldn't let him out if the door was open, because that little bugger is gonna start wanting to explore, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, you can of course find me on Holy Crap, the vlogcast, which is Sunday mornings at 12:05 a.m. with Shujin Tribble and our motley crew of panelists. This week we celebrated his 4th year of having the show, and we had Bionic Dance as a guest, which was kind of cool. She has a YouTube channel as well. And Richard has come and hung out with us before, so he survived. So we had a lot of good chat about the state of the American medical system and all that fun stuff, which he said not to get him started on. So we'll just like I said, man, come up here. We got lots of openings, and it's a lot simpler. But we don't have New Jersey or New York though. So, but Toronto's good. Well,
I like Toronto.
Toronto's a great city. I would live there if it didn't cost 2 arms and a leg to live there. But yeah, big city. That's what you expect. And of course, we'll be here next week. We don't have anything specific planned yet, but we'll get on that. We'll let you know. We have a bunch of feelers out for a bunch of guests, so it'll all determine on who's going to come out first and say they're free. So we'll let you know how that goes. We try to get it sewn down ahead of time, but it doesn't always work, and people have busy schedules and such. So we'll keep you posted. And of course, you can also find me on the other show, Full Quranic, where I read the Quran, so you don't have to. And all of that Allah goodness, or not so good, as the case usually is. And that's at www.fullquranic.com. You can catch that at that point. So until next week, again, thank you, Richard, and we will see everybody then, and we will leave with our human creed for mankind. See you next week.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.